Danger might be closer than you think. Before we begin, like this video, comment where and what time you're watching from, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Now turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the unknown. My name's Kaio. I'm 38, and this happened in July of last year, 2024. I was on a solo RV trip across the Southwest, taking a few weeks off work to clear my head. I've always liked the open road, places where the sky feels endless, and you don't see another soul for hours. That day I was heading south on Route 191 in Arizona, one of those stretches where the land feels like it hasn't been touched in decades. It was the fourth day of the trip. No real plan, just driving until I felt like stopping. Around late afternoon, I spotted this faded, half-bent road sign that said, "Rest area 2 miles." It wasn't on Google Maps, but I figured why not. When I pulled in, the place looked completely abandoned. Just a rusted metal awning, a couple of cracked concrete benches, an old chemical toilet, and a lone picnic table covered in desert dust. Still, it had a kind of quiet beauty to it. I parked the RV facing west so I could watch the sunset, made some instant coffee, and just sat there, soaking it. In over an hour, not a single car passed. By 7:30 p.m., the light had started to vanish behind the hills, and I figured it was time to pack up and get ready for sleep. That's when I heard it, a sharp crack, like a footstep on dry gravel, just behind the restroom. You know the sound when someone shifts their weight on loose stone? That unmistakable crunch. I glanced out the side window but didn't see anything. Maybe an animal, I told myself. A coyote. But then there was another crack. And then, one more. Then silence. No wind. No birds. Just a strange, unnatural stillness. I stepped toward the RV door and opened it just a few inches. The air outside felt heavy, like the atmosphere had thickened all of a sudden. I scanned the area. Nothing. But then something clicked. The door of the portable restroom, which had been slightly ajar earlier, was now fully shut. I was almost sure I'd left it that way. That tiny detail, that door being closed, sent a weird chill up my spine. I shut the RV door and locked it. That's when I started to hear it. Breathing, not loud, not fast. Slow, steady, like someone crouched just beneath the RV, trying not to be heard. I stood completely still, listening. The breathing didn't stop. It wasn't wind or some animal panting. It had rhythm, depth. It sounded human. I crouched near the floor and turned off all the lights inside the RV, even the small overhead ones. Everything went dark except for the last bit of twilight outside. I didn't want to move, didn't want to make a sound, but my hands were shaking. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then I felt something, just a small vibration beneath my feet, like a hand had gently tapped the underside of the RV. I backed away slowly, sat on the edge of the bed with my eyes locked on the floor. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Maybe the metal expanding. Maybe I was just freaking myself out. But then my phone, completely off, charging near the sink, lit up. The screen didn't turn on. It just lit like someone pressed the side button. It buzzed once, then again. I picked it up, and for a split second I saw a notification that made my stomach drop. Photo saved to gallery. I hadn't taken any photos. I opened the gallery app, hands trembling, and there it was. A single new photo, pitch black except for a faint outline of the RV floor. The shot had clearly been taken from underneath the vehicle. I dropped the phone and stood up too fast, bumping into the window. That's when I saw the shape darting across the edge of the headlights. Not walking, crawling. It moved low to the ground with a kind of fluid motion that didn't make sense for a human. Long arms, no sound. Just that slow movement disappearing into the shadows near the rest area sign. I went into panic mode. I started the engine without even putting my shoes on. Backed out so hard I nearly hit one of the concrete benches. My headlights caught the edge of the restroom, and the door was wide open again. Just swinging back and forth. There was no wind. Nothing else moved. I drove 10 miles before I even looked back. Finally pulled into a gas station where a couple of truckers were parked for the night. I parked between them, locked the doors, and didn't sleep a second. Just sat there clutching the wheel, waiting for the sun. The next morning I checked my phone again. The photo was gone. I looked through every folder, even the deleted files. Nothing. But I know what I saw. It was real. The timestamp was 7:53 p.m., exactly the time I'd heard that breathing. I didn't tell anyone at the gas station. What would I even say? Hey, something was under my RV last night and took a picture? They'd laugh or think I was high. I just filled the tank, bought coffee strong enough to burn my throat, and kept driving, south away from the desert. A few days later, in a small town near the border, I pulled into a mechanic's shop to have the tires checked before heading back east. The guy hoisted up the RV and called me over after a few minutes. "You got someone riding under here?" he asked, half joking. I asked what he meant, and he pointed to the undercarriage. Weird scratches like handprints, but spaced wrong. I looked. There were smears in the dust, almost like fingers. But the spacing wasn't human, longer, thinner, almost like claws that didn't quite dig in. I didn't stick around. I didn't ask more questions. I thanked him, paid, and left. Since then, I've done shorter RV trips, always, staying in well-lit campgrounds with other people around. I don't stop at random rest areas anymore, especially the ones that aren't on any map. And I always check under the RV before getting in or out. I know that sounds paranoid, but once you see something that moves like that, you start to question every quiet night, every shadow near your headlights. I don't know what I ran into that night. Maybe it was just someone twisted, someone who lives out there, preying on people who stop to rest. Or maybe it was something older, something that knows how to stay hidden in the desert. But if you're ever driving through Route 191 and you see an old sign for a rest stop that doesn't show up on GPS, keep going. No photo, no proof. Just the feeling that whatever was under my RV that night, it was waiting. Story 2. My name's Melissa, I'm 33, and this happened during the summer of 2023. I'd just bought a used RV after years of dreaming about solo road trips, and that July, I finally took off from Portland with no real itinerary, just a general plan to explore through Idaho and Montana. The idea was to spend most nights at smaller, lesser-known campgrounds, closer to nature, fewer people, and easier to relax. I was maybe 10 days into the trip when I pulled into a free campground near a small lake in northern Idaho. I found it through a Facebook group. No facilities, no rangers, just a clearing by the water and a few marked fire rings. When I arrived, there were only 2 other RVs in the area. One was parked further down the trail, half hidden by trees, and the other was empty. It looked abandoned, honestly. Beat-up exterior, flat rear tire, one window taped up with a trash bag. I figured maybe someone left it there during a breakdown. I set up at the opposite end of the clearing, right near the shoreline, facing the lake. It was quiet, peaceful. There was a breeze coming off the water and just enough cloud cover to keep it cool. I made dinner, read a bit, and watched the sun drop behind the pine trees. Felt like the perfect evening. Around 9 p.m., I noticed something odd. The RV with the busted window, its interior light came on, just for a second, one long flicker, and then nothing. I stared at it for a while, wondering if maybe someone had come back, but I hadn't heard an engine, no footsteps on the gravel, nothing, just that single light, flickering on like a dying flashlight. I was about to brush it off when I saw something move in the window. Not a full figure, just a shift, like a shoulder or a head ducking out of sight. Now here's the thing, I don't scare easily. I've camped alone before, and I've dealt with weird people, but something about the way that light flicked on, it felt off. Like it wasn't triggered by a person flipping a switch, it was timed somehow. Like it waited until I was watching. I tried to keep calm, closed the blinds, locked the door, and turned on the little fan near the bed to drown out the silence. I told myself I was being paranoid, but a few minutes later I heard a knocking sound. Not on my door, on my RV window. 3 soft taps, coming from the side that faced the lake. The side with no path, just trees. I froze. It wasn't the kind of knock that says hello or oops, wrong camper. It was slow, deliberate, like whoever or whatever was tapping wanted to see how I'd react. I killed the lights immediately and crouched beside the bed, trying to peek through the blind without moving it too much. Outside, everything was pitch dark. No flashlight, no phone glow, nothing but the outline of the trees. But then I noticed something strange. Ripples on the lake. Fast, chaotic ones. The air was still. There was no wind. Something had moved through the water. I stayed like that, crouched and listening for maybe 20 minutes. My heart was hammering, and every little sound made me flinch. The knocking didn't come back. Eventually, I started to think maybe it was a bird or an animal brushing against the roadside. Just as I stood up to turn the fan back on, I heard it again, but this time from the back of the RV. 3 knocks, same rhythm. That part of the RV faces dense trees, with no clear walking path, just thick brush. I hadn't even set foot back there when I arrived. That's when the motion sensor light came on. I'd forgotten I even had it. It's just one of those little battery-powered ones by the back ladder, meant to scare off raccoons. It lit up the brush behind the RV for a few seconds. And that time I saw something I still can't explain. A figure, tall, thin but hunched, was standing just inside the tree line, facing me, not moving. The light went off again before I could really make out details, but what I remember most clearly is that it didn't have any reflection in the eyes. Animals always reflect. People too, if they're close enough. But this thing? Nothing. I locked every latch on the door and grabbed the emergency air horn I keep near the bed. Sat in the dark. Barely. Breathing. At some point I heard shuffling. Soft steps moving slowly along the gravel loop that runs through the campground. I never heard an engine, never heard anyone call out. Just footsteps. At least 4 or 5 other taps came throughout the night, each from a different side of the RV. None were loud, none were rushed. Just calm, patient knocks, like it knew I wasn't going anywhere. When the sky finally started turning blue again, I was still sitting up, gripping that air horn so tight my hand had gone numb. I waited until full daylight before I even cracked a window. The campground looked completely normal, silent, calm. The abandoned RV was still there, still looking like no one had touched it in years. I stepped outside and circled mine carefully. No footprints, no scratches, no trash left behind. But on the back window, written into the condensation from the morning dew, were 3 fingerprints, long and narrow, way longer than mine. I packed everything up in under 10 minutes, didn't even make coffee. Just drove straight out, tires spitting gravel as I pulled back onto the main road. About a mile up, I passed the second RV, the one I thought had someone in it. It was gone. No tracks, no sign it had ever been there. I even stopped and walked around the spot. Just dead grass in a square, like something had sat there too long and then vanished. I left Idaho that same day, cut the whole trip short by a week and stayed at KOA's the rest of the way home, surrounded by people and lights. A few days later, I posted in that same Facebook group asking if anyone else had camped at that lake recently. Most comments were normal, people talking about how beautiful it was. But one guy messaged me privately and said, "That place isn't listed as a campground anymore. It was removed from the site 2 years ago after a girl went missing there. Her RV was found empty. Lights still on." I didn't respond. I deleted the post and left the group. I still have the RV. Still. Travel sometimes, but never alone anymore. And never without checking that all the spots I go to are active, verified, and visible on satellite view. I don't know what was out there by that lake. I don't want to know. But if you ever find a quiet little site that doesn't show up on Google anymore, and there's an old camper already there with no one inside, keep driving. Story 3. My name's Eric. I'm 41 now, but this happened back in 2020 when I took a 2-week solo RV trip through New Mexico. It was right after my dad passed away, and honestly, I just needed space to think. I'd been driving through mostly empty stretches of highway for days, little desert towns, run-down gas stations, and more jackrabbits than I could count. One night, I ended up pulling off the road onto a flat patch of desert near an old service road. It wasn't an official campground or anything, but it was public land and totally legal to park overnight. There was nothing around, just scrub brush, sand, and those low desert hills in the distance. No lights, no cell service, no traffic. I cooked dinner on my little propane stove, played a podcast out loud to fill the silence, and cracked a beer while the sky went full black. Stars like I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Around 10 p.m., I shut everything down and climbed into bed. I always leave one of the shades up just a bit, so I can see the stars from the pillow. That's when I noticed something strange. Movement on the side of the road. A figure, walking slowly along the shoulder. At first I figured it was another traveler. Maybe someone had pulled over somewhere down the road and was walking to get signal. But they were moving weird, stiff, like every step took effort. I watched for a few seconds, then sat up when I realized they were wearing white, head to toe. Not a jacket or hoodie either. It looked like some kind of hospital gown, fluttering in the wind. Long hair, dark and stringy. The person kept walking past my RV, not looking toward it, just dragging one foot slightly, like they were barefoot. I wanted to believe it was someone who needed help. I really did, but something in my gut told me not to open the door, not to move. I just sat there, completely still, watching from behind the glass. The figure walked about 20 more feet, then stopped, stood there, still facing away. Not looking at anything, just standing dead center in the road. After what felt like a full minute, she slowly turned her head toward my RV. But not her body, just the head. And even though it was too dark to see her face clearly, I swear I saw a smile. I dropped below the window without even thinking, heart racing, hands sweating. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew it wasn't right. I crawled to the driver's seat as quietly as I could and started the engine. Not turning the headlights on yet. I waited, listening, hoping she had kept walking. But when I finally looked back through the windshield, she was gone. No trace. Just empty road in both directions. I turned the lights on, still nothing. My mind was scrambling to find a logical explanation, but my gut was telling me to get the hell out of there. I drove maybe 15 miles up the highway before pulling off at a rest stop. A real one this time, with picnic tables and vending machines. It was empty, but it felt safer. I parked under a light, locked every door, and stayed in the front seat for a while, just watching the road. Around 2 a.m., I finally crawled back into bed, still on edge. I kept the blinds shut this time. No stargazing, no more open windows. Just silence and that dry desert wind tapping on the side of the RV. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of gravel crunching. Not a lot. Just a single step right outside the door. I froze, not moving a muscle. After a few seconds, I got the courage to peek through the top sliver of the blind. No one was there. But when I opened the door about an hour later, I found something tucked into the yacht handle. A hospital bracelet. Old, sun-faded, cracked. The name was smudged out, but the date was still clear. July 12, 1996. The bracelet was ice cold to the touch, even in the desert heat. I threw it as far into the sand as I could, got back in the RV, and didn't stop driving until I hit Texas. I didn't talk about it for a long time. Still don't really. I never saw her again. But sometimes, when I'm parked alone in the middle of nowhere, I get that same cold, crawling feeling in my chest. And I swear, once or twice I've caught the smell of antiseptic in the air, like an old hospital. So if you're ever out on Highway 60 at night and you see someone walking the shoulder in a white gown, don't stop. Story 4. My name's Jonah. I'm 46 now, and this happened in September 2022. I was doing a long-haul RV trip up the West Coast, mostly sticking to state parks and forest campgrounds. That night I pulled into a campground in Northern California, up near the Shasta Trinity area. It was late past 8 p.m., but there was still a little light in the sky, just enough to see the wooden sign that said, "Campground full, host on site." I almost turned around, but figured it was worth checking in with the camp host anyway. Maybe they had a no-show. I rolled in slowly and noticed something strange right away. There were maybe 3 other RVs and 1 tent set up, but no sound. No campfires, no chatter, no kids running around. Just stillness. I followed the signs up to the host site, and sure enough, there was a small white trailer with a clipboard hanging from a post out front. No one came out, so I got out of my rig and walked over. There was a handwritten note on the clipboard. "Late arrivals okay, take site number 6 and check in by morning." I figured I'd lucked out. Site number 6 was shaded, tucked against the tree line with a clear view of the main loop. I backed in, hooked up, and settled in for the night. Around 9:30, I was sitting at my little folding table with a beer, just listening to the crickets finally start up when I saw someone walking up the road toward the host trailer. They had a lantern in one hand and a dog leash in the other, but no dog. I watched them walk up to the trailer, stop, and just stand there. The lantern wasn't lit. They didn't knock, didn't go inside, just stood there, facing the door. After about 2 full minutes of total stillness, they turned around and walked back down the road, past my sight this time. I waved, just being polite, but they didn't even glance at me. Just walked slow, dragging the leash behind them. I remember thinking maybe it was someone with dementia or just exhausted from the trail. Still, the whole thing sat weird with me. I went inside and locked the door, just in case. My plan was to check in properly with the host in the morning, and maybe ask if that person was okay. The next morning, I walked back up to the host trailer with a cup of coffee in hand. The clipboard was still there, but the note was gone. In its place was a blank sheet of paper, clipped neatly with no writing. I knocked on the trailer door, no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the weeds growing under the trailer were completely undisturbed, like no one had moved that thing in weeks. The small camp host sign that hung on the side looked sun-bleached, older than I remembered from the night before. Something wasn't adding up. I went to the camp office by the entrance, a tiny building, with maps and posted rules, and found a number for the regional ranger station. I gave them a call, mostly to ask if there actually was a camp host on duty. The guy on the phone was friendly at first, until I mentioned the trailer and the note about site number 6. He got quiet, then asked me to describe the trailer. When I did, he let out a long sigh and said, "Sir, that trailer was removed almost 2 years ago after an incident. Are you sure you saw it?" I laughed nervously, said, "Yeah, I was very, sure that I even parked based on a note that had been hanging out front." He didn't say much after that, just that someone would swing by later to check on things. I hung up and went back to my site, feeling that slow-building dread crawl into my stomach. The trailer wasn't there anymore, just dirt and tire tracks where I knew I'd stood less than an hour before. I walked back and forth through the spot, convinced I was losing my mind. There was no sign of the clipboard, the post, the trailer. Nothing. Just empty ground. I packed up quickly after that. As I was pulling onto the loop to exit, I passed one of the other campers, an older guy in a faded truck camper. He flagged me down and leaned in through my window. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in days. I didn't say anything, just stared. "She shows up every now and then," he said, nodding toward the trees. "Never speaks, just walks that loop. Still thinks she's looking for the, dog. Poor thing." He tapped the side of my rig and said, "Be safe," before walking away. I left the campground without looking back, drove for 3 hours straight until I hit a diner off the interstate. I sat there for a while, just trying to make sense of what happened. I kept replaying that moment. The lantern, the leash dragging, the way she didn't even look at me. It felt wrong, like something I shouldn't have witnessed. When I finally had service again, I looked up incidents in that park. Didn't find much. Just a local news piece from 2020 about a woman who went missing in that area while camping with her dog. They found the dog weeks later, starving, still sitting by her empty trailer. I don't know if it was her. I don't know if I saw a ghost, a residual loop, or something else entirely. But I do know that what I saw was real, tangible, detailed in a way dreams never are. The clipboard, the handwriting, the way she moved like she was following a routine she'd done 1,000 times before. That campground still shows up on apps and maps, but if you dig deeper, there's no mention of a host. No contact info, just a name and directions. Like it's trying to be forgotten without being erased. I've taken a few RV trips since then, but I stick to busy places now. Places with camp stores and loud kids and fire pits that crackle through the night. And if I ever see a handwritten note telling me where to park without a soul in sight, I keep driving. I don't stop. I don't knock. I don't wait for someone to appear out of the dark with a leash in one hand and a look like they've been walking the same loop for years. Some campgrounds have stories that aren't listed on the brochures. Stories the trees remember, even when people forget. If you ever stay in Northern California and you pull into a place that feels too quiet, look for the host trailer. If it's there, leave. Story 5. I'm Olivia, 36, and I've been living the RV life full-time since early 2021. This story happened in October of that same year, while I was camped near the Blue Ridge Mountains in northern Georgia. It was one of those no-name campgrounds you find when everything else is booked. Privately owned, barely maintained, but cheap and tucked away just enough to feel peaceful. I was in the middle of a long East Coast loop, chasing fall colors and enjoying the quiet before winter. The campground was almost empty, just me and an older couple in a Class C parked 2 sites down. It started, raining on a Thursday afternoon. Light drizzle at first, just enough to cancel the short hike I had planned. I didn't mind. It gave me an excuse to make tea, wrap myself in a blanket, and finally read through a book that had been sitting on my shelf for months. But by nightfall, the rain got heavier, louder. I remember lying in bed listening to it hit the roof like static turned all the way up. I fell asleep around 11, expecting it to pass by morning like most mountain showers do. But it didn't. Stop. Not the next day, not the one after. It just kept coming, steady and hard, day and night. I checked the weather app when I had signal, and it just said clear or light showers. But this wasn't light. It was relentless. The ground around my site turned to thick mud by day 2. The couple down the way left sometime Friday night. I heard their engines start up around 2 a.m., then silence again. When I stepped out Saturday morning, their site was empty. But what really unsettled me was the fact that all their hookups were still connected. Power, water, everything. They'd left in a hurry. That evening, I started noticing something odd. The sound of the rain wasn't consistent anymore. It would stop, just for a few seconds at a time, like someone pressing pause. And in those gaps, I'd hear something else. A soft tapping on the side of the RV, almost polite. It moved too. Sometimes it came from the back, sometimes from the passenger door. Always light, never forceful. I tried to convince myself it was just branches or dripping water hitting weird, but deep down I knew it wasn't. There were no trees close enough to reach the RV. And the rain? It never stopped long enough for anything else to be that clear. By the third night, I was genuinely scared. The rain had created this eerie cocoon of noise, and those short silences in between had become unbearable. Every time the rain paused, I held my breath, waiting for the tapping to start. It always did. 3 soft knocks, sometimes 4, never rushed, like someone was testing the walls. I stopped sleeping altogether, just lay there with the blanket pulled up to my chin, flashlight in hand, scanning the small space over and over. At some point around 3 a.m., I heard the passenger door handle jiggle, not once but twice, like someone trying it gently, as if not to wake me. I bolted upright and slid into the driver's seat, heart pounding. I couldn't see anyone outside. The condensation on the windows was too thick. From all the humidity, I wiped a small circle with my sleeve and peered out. Nothing but rain. Still, I turned the engine on, ready to take off. But when I shifted into drive, the headlights flicked on and caught something. Just at the edge of the trees, barely visible through the downpour, there was a figure. Tall, narrow, completely still. It was facing the RV. No umbrella, no poncho, just standing in the rain like it didn't notice it was soaked through. I didn't move, didn't breathe. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough either. After a long minute, I turned the headlights off and killed the engine. Just sat there in the dark, gripping the wheel. When I looked again, the figure was gone. I waited till sunrise to do anything. When light finally broke through the clouds, I went outside to disconnect my hookups and leave. That's when I noticed it. Footprints in the mud, bare feet, leading up to the passenger door, around the back, and then just stopping. No trail away, no sign of someone walking off, just vanished. I never checked out, never spoke to the camp owner. I drove all day without stopping, straight through to a friend's place in Asheville. I didn't even tell her the full story, just that I'd had a rough night and needed to crash for a while. She gave me hot coffee and didn't ask questions. That night, as I tried to fall asleep in a real bed, I could still hear it, that tapping, not on the RV anymore. This time, in the back of my mind, 3 slow knocks. A sound I don't think I'll ever fully unhear. A few days later, I checked the weather records out of curiosity. There'd been no major storm system over that area. The station closest to the campground reported only light drizzle on the day I arrived, and clear skies afterward. No mention of the heavy rain I sat through for nearly 3 days straight. That didn't make sense. I even checked road cams on the main highway nearby. Dry roads, sunshine. Meanwhile, I'd been stuck in a pocket of endless downpour, like the storm had singled out that patch of woods. I thought maybe it was just me, maybe exhaustion or grief messing with my head. But a week later, I got an email from the campground. It was a generic message, probably automated, asking for feedback on my stay. But there was one line that didn't feel like boilerplate text. It said, "We're sorry about the weather. Most guests don't stay through the third night." I never mentioned how long I'd stayed. I never responded. I just archived the message and deleted the GPS tag for that site from my maps. I still live in my RV, still travel, but I've developed rules, little ones, personal things I stick to no matter what. I never stay more than 2 nights in the same remote campground. I don't ignore those quiet feelings in my gut anymore. And if it starts raining in a place that was supposed to be dry, I don't wait to see how long it lasts. I drive. Because whatever that thing was, whoever was knocking on my RV in the silence, between the rain, I think it wanted me to stay. And I think if I had stayed one more night, I wouldn't have left at all.